I'm Greg Kesich at the Portland Press Herald, and I'm the editorial page editor, and I'm here with the Crack Sunday team, columnists Caron and Cynthia Dill. And
Hello. Hi there.
And
we're just loving it right
We
now.
are loving it. It's a day before Thanksgiving, and we're watching the transition unfold. And I was wondering, you guys have any thoughts about that?
Well, he has been interesting in the first week. He's resorted back to being himself on Twitter, which is interesting. I mean, they had control of him for about 10 days. And then he began to tweet about who the ambassador from Britain should be and many other things. So welcome back, Donald. And other than that, it's been interesting to watch how quickly they are backpedaling from so many of their promises, ranging from immigration to now even climate change, where he says all of a sudden he has an open mind on climate.
Well, that's what I find so interesting. It's not surprising to me at all that Donald Trump is not immediately, trying to prosecute Hillary Clinton, or that he's, not embracing the white supremacist groups. I mean, it seems so obvious when he was campaigning that it wasn't really his sincere beliefs that were motivating those sentiments. And so for his supporters to be surprised, I just think they're more misinformed than I even thought they could possibly be.
Yeah. Have you heard this axiom that Clinton supporters and the media did not take Trump seriously, but they took him literally, and that Trump supporters were the opposite. They took him seriously, but not literally?
I think that's just too neat a way to try to explain it. And I think it's more complicated than that. I think Clinton supporters took Trump seriously. I was a, obvious Clinton supporter, and Trump was serious. I mean, going into the elections, the polls were close. I mean, he was gathering masses. He won the Republican primary. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It was a serious election, and he won.
What I saw a lot of was people mocking him, his style, the way he dressed, the way he combs his hair, the kind of funny words he uses and makes up. And this kind of feeling that he was not really, they kept saying over and over he's not qualified to be president. And that's what I mean by not taking him seriously.
Well, they said the same thing about Hillary Clinton. I mean, both sides were saying the same thing about their respective candidates. I mean, we've been hearing about how Hillary Clinton has fat ankles and, her looks, and she's made fun of and, caricatured like there's no tomorrow. And her supporters obviously disagreed with that, but the Trump people thought she was unqualified, unfit, that she should be locked up. I mean, it was just this, a theme, but in my heart, I thought it was serious, and I know the Clinton campaign did. I mean, they worked really hard. There was never a letting up of the campaign and to try to, there was never evidence that the Clinton campaign itself was taking it for granted.
Yeah. Maybe this was more of a media thing. What do you think?
Well, we've got a couple of different conversations going on, but I think on the point of the Clinton campaign, there was a moment when they got a little confident and they began to expand the map, you'll remember, before the FBI letter dropped. And I suspect if they had that to do over, all of us have hindsight, so aren't we brilliant at the moment, but I expect they would have rather spent that time in the Midwest states. And it did feel a little bit like some of them were measuring curtains a little early. Now, in fairness, the whole country was developing this attitude. The polling I'm waiting to see, the analysis I'm waiting to see of this race, is how many people in the last weekend thought that it was Hillary Clinton's race and either decided to protest vote with Trump or to protest vote with Stein or Johnson. That is a really critical number, I think, because everyone in the world had Clinton winning that race 5 days out.
Or stay home.
Yeah, or stay home.
Right, that would be the other protest.
Or stay home.
Yeah.
They all have the same effect.
Yeah.
But that analysis has not been done. I'm anxious to see it. I don't
well,
blame
me too,
Clinton
but I guess
I don't blame Clinton for that or the campaign. I thought they ran a really tough, great campaign. You know, I wrote a couple of months ago that it was hers to lose, and then I wrote later to say she did everything she had to do. She couldn't control the FBI leak, which was turned out to be a huge factor. She couldn't control the polling world and the punditry world that had it all wrapped up. And it was only a question of by what margin 5 days out. But I do think that was a critical event. People thinking that she had it in the bag. And I know people personally that I talked with on that last weekend who were going to vote for Johnson or vote for Trump because they thought it was safe to do it.
They thought it was safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the analysis will certainly be interesting to look at, but I guess I'm not all that confident that analysis is really worth anything. I mean, we had all this analysis going into the election, and it totally surprised us. I mean, the electoral map is just amazing. I think the fact that the numbers keep coming in about the magnitude of Clinton's popular vote win is just astounding. I mean, you know, it's like over 2.5 million votes, I think, at this point. I mean, for a presidential candidate to win that much of a majority of the country but fall so short in electoral votes, I mean, the analysis of her, the projections of where she was going to win and how she was going to win were just so off by so far.
Yeah, but when you dig into those numbers, there was an analysis this week about, I think it was on NPR, about 1.25 million of those votes are in Los Angeles County.
Yeah.
So it skews the overall number when you have concentrations in California or New York, but it doesn't. I mean, I hate this electoral college system. I wish we didn't have it, but we do have it, and those are the rules that everybody played by. And so the popular margin is an interesting conversation, but doesn't really mean much. I mean, she had to win a couple of critical states that she should have won. And I would say that Democrats should have won, and that's really where we are going forward. How do you win those states in the future? Because if this is the new map, it's a problem.
So Democrats are doing a lot of soul searching right now. And one of the controversies I was hoping we could talk about is the idea that that there's been too much identity politics. I think a number of people have talked about it, but Bernie Sanders was in some public forum this week, and he said that we have to think more in terms of class terms and not so much other identities. I think the guy that's running against Nancy Pelosi, I'm forgetting his name, Ryan, in the House of Representatives, has talked about wanting to be more focused on bread and butter economic issues, and what he doesn't say is less focused on things like gay rights, certain minority rights, and I'm just wondering what you think of that. Is that's a conversation that's going on in the Democratic Party now, and where do you stand, Cynthia?
Well, I mean, there's no, in my mind, separating identity politics from economic issues. I mean, the reason why we have identity politics is because it's the history of this country that groups of people, typically minorities and women, are not on a level playing field economically. They've been discriminated against. And so the reason why people use identity and sometimes gender to set themselves apart is to simply make the case that we live in an unequal society, and that, you know, this election, I think a lot of people would interpret as being the white working class people making sure that the status quo of them being in a higher position socioeconomically is maintained. I mean, so I think there was an identity politics in the Trump camp far more stronger than the Democrats. Now, that's not to say, do I think that Democrats should have a platform that only, you know, talks about identity and gender and protecting civil rights and transgender bathroom? Absolutely not. Economic issues always have to be at the forefront. But I think it's too simplistic to suggest that we're just going to stop talking about identity when you're talking about economic issues. They go hand in hand.
Now, you've written about sort of the loss of the Democratic hold on working class voters. And that's obviously a big issue in Maine because that's what we got. We got lots of and it's not, working class people.
It's not a loss, it's an erosion over time. So it's easily recoverable. I think. It's not at the point where Democrats have lost working class voters in general, or lost them permanently. But I think the issue is really, how do you reassemble the coalition that was a winning coalition for Democrats? And so it's not an either-or choice. It's, okay, this isn't holding together quite well right now. And I think in some ways, maybe Barack Obama's election in 2008 masked an underlying problem, because he galvanized so many young people and black people and others, that the erosion of blue-collar support or working-class support was covered over. And I think it really revealed itself this time more than any of us thought it would. For a variety of reasons, Hillary wasn't as successful with those groups. So to me, the challenge for the Democrats going forward is, how do you reassemble a coalition? And the problem is, when you lose, everybody's firing at everybody inside their own tent. Contrast to what's happening with Republicans. They were the splintered party that was, everybody hated everybody, but they won. And now they're all like hunky-dory and trying to figure it out. That won't hold together for long. But on the Democratic side, I just cringe when I look at some of these comments online of Democrats attacking other Democrats for really parsing small things. And so I think part of the challenge is for the Democrats is to move beyond that phase quickly and figure out, how do we get identity politics and class politics back into the same party. Right,
and I think that there's no denying that the Republicans and the Trump camp specifically really preyed on identity politics. I mean, the whole "Make America Great Again." Let's go back to a time when, the white guys in the Midwest and the people working the mills, mostly men, mostly white, could make enough money to support a family, and they can't anymore. And it was mostly, I think, the decline of socioeconomic status for a group of white people that really stirred a lot of passion on the Trump campaign's part. So I think that, I think it's really good to talk about identity politics, but I don't think Democrats are the only party that are going there.
No. Can you imagine a politician giving a speech when they tick off the litany of all the groups are going to help, singling out white people? In addition, saying, and we're going to be there for the working class, white, non-college educated mill worker, and we're going to be there for the school teacher. It's the kind of thing we haven't really thought of white as an identity, because it's sort of the default. It's this pervasive undercurrent of America.
I bet if you asked any minority on the street if they consider white to be a category,
right.
It is.
Right.
I mean, white people don't see it.
But white people don't. I guess that's my point.
Yeah.
And white people don't see it in the way, say, an Asian person or a black person does.
Well, and that's what is so frustrating to me, is when I hear people criticize as politically correct, this or that. It's almost like they just don't want any rules to apply to how they talk. There's just a lot of, I think, frustrated white people who feel that the economy has left them behind. So they want to be able to say whatever's on their mind, and they think it's politically correct to suggest that you shouldn't say offensive things based on race.
About a year ago, I was talking to a Democratic activist, and I mentioned sort of favorably the way Bernie Sanders was talking to labor people, and in class terms, and how that could be a positive for the Democrats to talk in economic terms rather than identity groups. And he got kind of miffed, and he said that no, because a middle class black person is much worse off than a middle class white person, and a poor black person is still behind a poor white person, and economically, and you can't talk in class terms because race is so important in the history of this country.
One of the things that I think we don't pay enough attention to, and all of that could be true, is true, but a person's experience is relative to their own experience, not to the experience of someone else. So a white working class family that rose to the middle class as mine did and then fell back. It may be that a black family that rose to the middle class didn't rise as high and maybe fell further back. I don't know that in every case, but let's assume that for the moment. Well, they both are struggling in very similar ways, in ways that unite them, which is they want to get back to where they were, or they're living on the edge. The edge might be different for each of them, but I think trying to say, well, that group doesn't matter because they went higher and they didn't fall as far, it misses the whole point of the fear that people are feeling across the spectrum. And on this other point of identity politics and working class, look, Democrats didn't perform as well with a lot of working class people, not just white people. Hispanics, black working class people. I mean, there was erosion everywhere relative to 2012 and 2008. So to me, we're oversimplifying to talk about white people. Democrats did badly among people who didn't have college educations. If you want to think of it that way, think of it that way. Now, there's a class correlation. We know that. But we get ourselves onto a track about white people. And this is part of what I see online, like a sort of good, thoughtful, progressive people describing white working class people in these huge generalizations about being racist, about being like, that is crazy talk.
Oh, yeah. Well, I certainly would never support overgeneralizing and stereotyping a negative like that. But I just think it's impossible to, I mean, the fear that was being injected into the election by the Trump campaign was the fear of, for the most part, the white working class, that and he suggested that the reason for their decline is the other, is the minorities, and is, women, feminists trying to get too much that they don't earn, or immigrants who are here unlawfully taking away jobs, and Muslims who are, doing bad things. So I just think it's not as easy to say that it doesn't count either. I think
it's a mix of things.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it doesn't count. Bernie Sanders appealed to those same people with arguments about trade deals. Now, he didn't inject race, to his credit, and I don't think he would, in the way that Trump did. This is clear that Trump used race wherever they could use it, in every exploiting way they could. But Sanders demonstrated the way to talk about the insecurity of working class people and the loss of certain jobs without going to the other.
Yeah, but he didn't get any of the minority vote among Democrats. I mean, so yeah, he did a great job convincing, Maine and some of these Midwestern states, but down in the South,
well, he didn't. And in the end, Hillary Clinton didn't get enough of the voters he was speaking with. So that's the fracture I'm talking about.
Yeah.
There's no way to say if only one side or the other had their own way, they could have won this thing. Because I think, to me at least, the math doesn't work. I mean, those two sides need to come together. And that's how the message gets more to a populist economic message than it has been. And absent that, I mean, if the Democrats fracture along these lines in an ongoing way, I don't like any of the trend lines there. I know people refer to demographics and blah, 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 all the stuff. Well, it didn't bear out in this election.
The guys that wrote that book, The Emerging Democratic Majority in 2007, have backed off.
Yeah.
They said, it's been really exaggerated, that you just have to wait until the new majority presents itself. And
there was a certain kind of arrogance, I thought, within some elements of the Democratic Party, that they could win with the identity politics elements, with blacks, with women, on the presumption that all women would vote Democratic, most overwhelmingly vote Democratic. Turned out it didn't happen. I mean, Hillary Clinton lost white women. She only won college-educated white women, I think by 51%. So there was a big issue going on. But if you started with the presumption that if you had women and you had blacks and you had Hispanics and you had gays and lesbians, that was it. walked to the White House, that assumption was exploded, I think, in this election against, let's remind ourselves, the weakest presidential candidate. I mean, people want to give Trump all this wonderful credit. He was a horrible and weak candidate. And there's no way in the world that if the Democratic coalition had held together better and people weren't dissing the folks on the other side in the way they were, there's no way Trump could be the president. I don't think his election signals some big transformation in America. And hell, he just, as you suggested, Cynthia, he just won by a little.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he didn't win at all.
Yeah.
Right, on a technicality kind of. But if it wasn't the campaign that she ran, what was it then that prevented that coalition from holding together?
Well, I think we saw it in the primary. I mean, you had two candidates appealing to two different elements of the historic Democratic coalition. One, you could argue, is emerging, the other declining. Mm-hmm. And they appeal to them in really totally different ways. Now, also, you had this element of sort of old Democrats, new Democrats. You had different things going on, but that never got fixed. It got papered over in the convention, and Sanders was out there and but I mean, I kept hearing from the Sanders people, which include members of my family who should go unnamed, through the whole thing, and they never went to Clinton. Now that's a small group, I get it, but there was an underlying assumption there that, anyway.
Yeah. Well, we should point out that 4 years ago, after Mitt Romney lost, the Republicans spent a lot of time doing a lot of soul searching and came up with a plan that Donald Trump completely trashed and has just charged into victory with doing none of it. So,
well, it seems to me like a small thing was just so many votes now are still being counted in California. I mean, Democrats should be organizing ways to get voters, counted earlier in these coastal states. I mean, why is it that there's such a disadvantage, to Democrats? Why should it be that whoever gets 271st when half of the people haven't even had a chance to vote? So it seems like there's got to be, we can just, look at our navels and think how are we going to get more, but also it seems to me this is like a math problem and a voter access problem. Like if Clinton won by such a significant majority of the popular vote, then there's got to be ways to figure out how to tap into those population centers and figure out a way to mobilize those people earlier so that there isn't this situation which we find ourselves in right now where...
Or get rid of the Electoral College.
Yeah.
Which ironically was set up to protect us against a demagogue.
yeah.
That was the purpose of the Electoral College, to make sure that if the voting population went mad and put forward some idiot, that the Electoral College could stand there and protect the Republic.
My hope is that,
How did that work out?
Well, be sure to bring on a revolution. If you can imagine if the Electoral College said, "Oh no, we can't.
That can't happen.
He doesn't meet our standards," and I think you would really definitely have people in the streets, and
the courts would have to decide.
Yeah.
It's always, there'd be some legal issue about whether the electors are bound or not. That would be a really interesting turn of events, which I hope we don't necessarily have to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're right. So he's it's starting to look a little more like a normal administration as it starts to take shape, and you're forced to hire people who know something about the subject that you need them to know about. So it's probably, maybe we'd see a slightly different cast of characters with a Jeb Bush administration, at least certainly on the staff side. But on the other side, on the cabinet members, we're probably seeing going to see a pretty standard conservative Republican team. Even though this wasn't really a win for conservative Republicanism, who else you got?
Well, and I can't even believe I'm saying this, but I find such consolation or like comfort in knowing that Mitt Romney might be the Secretary of State. Now, if you'd asked me that, in 2008, absolutely not. But
Old Mitt looks pretty good right now.
Mitt looks
Right.
really, pretty level-headed.
Can you imagine the hearing?
Yeah.
And then, you said he's a fraud and a con man and,
But he's
didn't you,
changed.
sir? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just think anyone who paid close attention to the election saw that Donald Trump said, A, B, C on Monday, C,
Yeah.
D, E on Tuesday, E, F, G on Wednesday, and then just completely changed his mind on all of those things. So the fact that he's now retreating from, the climate change is not maybe it's not a hoax, and Hillary Clinton is, I don't want to hurt the Clinton family, I'm not going to prosecute her, and I mean, of course he doesn't. He's not. He condemns and disavows white supremacist groups. He doesn't want their support. Of course he doesn't. It just emphasizes what elections do to people. It forces people to do really gross things. And I say that having been a candidate who's won and been a candidate who's lost, and coming on the other side of an election, you just realize, wow, you're really forced to do things that are difficult to do, to win,
There's so much widespread fear about Trump, the presidency, and I don't want to be complacent, because I think he's going to do some destructive things, and as quickly as they can do them. Maybe in the first 90, 100 days, every destructive thing they can do, they will try to do. But over the long term, the system coerces people, it reshapes them, and it sets up boundaries and conflicts. And if they thought this campaign was tough, good luck trying to do 3/4 of the things he promised to do, because his own party's going to fight him. And that's what I wrote about last week. And you're seeing it already. I mean, climate change is a perfect example. So you're out on the campaign trail. Every time you say climate change is a hoax, the crowd goes wild. You get big applause line. Now you're the president-elect. In come the generals who have been working on climate change for a long time and tell you, oh, by the way, the whole world is about to explode into chaos if we don't get on top of this thing. That's tough. There's no way you can persevere in your ignorance once you get into power with all of the information that the president has and all of the forces he has to deal with. So it'll be fun. I'm trying to figure out, what are the things they can actually do that won't get blocked by Democrats, blocked by Republicans, or blocked by the courts.
They could get rid of the filibuster rule, which would be huge, which I don't know that they will, but they could do that. They could repeal Dodd-Frank, repeal Obamacare, not replace it. Certainly hand out tax cuts. What's been so interesting to me is to see the market's response to the Trump candidacy. I mean, the market was predicting that Clinton was going to win. They're betting that she was going to win. They were betting that if he won, things would be really, really bad. And then lo and behold, he's elected, and we have this unbelievably bullish market. And the thing that's so interesting to me is all the bonds. I mean, the debt is skyrocketing, or the value of our debt. So it's just so, I just think, hypocritical of conservatives who talk about, we're going to lower government spending and reduce our deficit and debt. And at the same time now, we've got a Republican president, and the bond market is just taken off. Debt is our best friend.
Irrational exuberance.
Yeah.
Enjoy it while you can.
I want to go back to something you mentioned a few minutes ago, which was the Republican autopsy after the last election. And look at what was said, and it was all sort of thoughtful and predictable.
Make the tent bigger.
They really worked it out and broadened the
Comprehensive
tent and all that
immigration
stuff.
reform was there.
But none of them could have imagined a Republican who would run against trade, who would run as forcefully against immigration, and who would appeal to working class people in the Rust Belt. No, you couldn't expect that any Republican would allow their imagination to go to that place. So I don't fault them for what they did. I think it was smart work at the time. I just think somebody else out-imagined or went right around the whole caravan.
Or out improvised.
And just did it another way.
Right. Like in 2008, did anybody imagine Paul LePage coming out of Waterville and becoming governor?
No.
Him maybe, but nobody else.
Right.
And it wasn't. You wouldn't have drawn it up that way.
Yeah. And, people were talking about Peter Mills, and
now they're building a party around him.
Yeah.
So this is.
Yeah, it seems to me the trend there is people elect leaders who are going to, in their mind, stick it to the elites. And it's just such a, I don't know, fallacy that, I mean, that Donald Trump now is the face of our populist movement against elites is just, I mean, there's just such rich irony there that
There was a piece in the Harvard Business Review, which is going to make me sound like kind of an elite, but I didn't go to Harvard. But I read it online. And he said, this guy said that working class people are okay with like the super rich because they admire their freedom and their willingness to say whatever they want, but they feel they really dislike the sort of managerial class. That are
tells them what to do
all the time. Yeah. And
as my mother used to say, the big bosses are okay.
Yeah, exactly, right. It's exactly it.
Yeah,
but
that is
remember
exactly
that
it.
Sanders was talking about the 1%.
Right.
And he really was resonating with lots of people. So I think there is an element, if the economic populist story is told in the way that it's not the others coming across the border, it's the folks at the top that are ripping you off.
Yes.
Then I think, those votes move in a completely different direction.
Right. And if it's, we suddenly see widespread prosperity across all classes and all regions, this kind of Trump republicanism will be in for a while. But if that doesn't happen, and if the people who get the tax cuts just pocket the money, and we don't see the trade, the lack of trade deals resulting in new factories and all that kind of stuff, that people may not have been believing every single promise literally, but there's got to be some of them are going to have happen for this to be a permanent shift.
Yeah, Trump faces what Obama did in 2008, I think, which is expectations go up.
Yeah.
As much as people say, I didn't take him literally, there is an expectation that something's going to happen, some change that's going to make your life better.
Yeah.
So now they have to deliver. And I wrote about this last week. Try delivering on the promise to bring back manufacturing.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And it can't happen. So yes, people can find other jobs, and you can help people with training and education. You can do all these things, but you're not bringing back manufacturing, especially in trade wars with the rest of the globe. So if they don't deliver, this is one of the reasons why I think Democrats have to be really careful about not creating more division with working class people, because those are the votes that got Obama in office, and they're the votes that are going to get the next Democrat in office, but not if they're insulted all along the way. And there's a lot of insulting going on right now. I think Democrats have to be really careful about that, because I don't see how Trump can deliver. And I'll go a step further. This administration has the potential to be the most catastrophic, inept, and corrupt presidential administration that we've ever seen.
Right.
Ironically, the guy was running against, corruption. It's got all the makings, all of the trap doors to get themselves in a world of trouble and have people turn on them. Yeah. Not their core, not the LePage voters, not those crazy folks, but...
See, I just wonder what those core people, though, are going to think when... I wouldn't be surprised if Trump taps Hillary Clinton to do something in the administration, and that's going out on a limb. But, I'm sure he recognized in the debates that she's one of the most competent people we have about policy, in political circles, who's willing to put in the time and is committed to, the public service role. Now, that's but there's, I don't know. I
Just can't believe it, can you? Every once in a while, I read it. I like a President-elect Trump, and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Dang.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think right. He's Obama said Trump comes into this office with a lot fewer ideological positions than anybody else who's ever held it. And I think that's true. And I think he would be. I wouldn't be surprised for him to do something like that.
Yeah.
To put, send Hillary Clinton off to negotiate with Estonia or something. And
I don't think they'll do anything with Hillary Clinton, because it's one thing to do with Romney because he's a Republican, and if he ends up being benefited, it's great. It's another thing, and Obama with Hillary on the Secretary of State, it's another thing to resuscitate or put back into the public light a potential opponent 4 years from now. I mean, I just don't think. I think they will do everything in the world to keep her
or Bill Clinton
in the dark. Or,
if there's like
Bill Clinton,
it's possible, like if there's some kind of catastrophe in Africa that you could send Bill Clinton and the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah, because he's not a threat.
I don't think I don't think they. I don't know what I don't think. I don't think something, but I can't remember what it is. So there was a story in the Times today, the elite New York Times, that said that governors who came out early in support of Trump can expect some special goodies for their home states. And our governor was named as one of the governors who was an early supporter, and we might be in line for some special favors. And I'm wondering, what do you guys think we should be asking for?
That the president can deliver?
Yeah.
I guess all the repairs that needed on the Zumwalt destroyer get done at Bath Iron Works.
That's a good one.
Yeah, if they can get it out of the Panama Canal.
Exactly, including the towing.
That's a long tugboat haul.
Maybe one of Chimbro can
those guys from
take
Portland
one of its.
to tell them.
Yeah, so there's that.
I don't know. This state gets a lot, disproportional amount of federal money as it is. I'm not sure I buy the premise that the president has that kind of influence that he can handpick the states where he wants to reward.
Well, one thing he can do.
It's not really it's a spoil system, but it has limits. So
yeah, I mean, one thing I've seen, the LePage administration has butted heads with the Obama administration over a lot of waivers that they seek in their effort to reform welfare. So perhaps the new Trump administration can be a little bit more giving when it comes to the waivers and the various, things that Maine wants to do around welfare reform.
Getting IDs
which I don't
on
like.
EBT
exactly.
cards and there's Riverview.
if that's what they're going to cash in their chips for, I don't know. That's
Pretty good, $20 million a year.
I mean, I think what the more interesting thing is whether Lauren LePage is going to get a job in Washington, and if her star is going to start to rise. That strikes me as something that could be in the future.
What about Mary Mayhew?
She's been kind of quiet lately and behind the scenes. I'm wondering what's going on. But sure, I mean, does she want a position in Washington? Probably.
Couple of years, come back and run for governor.
Yeah.
I drain the swamp.
You don't have that much time. You have to start yesterday.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, I think if Governor LePage is thinking of running for U.S. Senate against Angus King, then Trump can use his apparatus and his, Twitter and the other tools he has maybe to help him win a seat in the U.S. Senate.
That would be good that they spend a lot of time on that.
So yes, only crazy people are thinking about 2018, the day before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So I think
we're not going there.
Yeah.
But if we were going to go there.
But I want to say thank you for coming in, and
Thank you.
we will do this again next week.
Okay.
Sounds good.